What's going on, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Expected Bets 4, powered by the Hockey Podcast Network. Today, we'll be breaking down the Buffalo Sabres, the hometown team here. I'm sure you guys got a few takes locked and loaded, ready to go. Before we do that, let's bring in the crew. Franco, how we doing?
Great. Ready to break down these boys. I'm kind of excited for this team, more so than I think most people will be. So I'm excited to look at it.
Yeah, I can't say they've popped up on too many articles I've been reading about Stanley Cup futures, but hey, who knows? Betsky, how about you? How you doing out there in Arizona?
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk about this team too. It's funny that the two co-hosts who aren't from Buffalo but the Sabres aren't our favorite teams may be more excited to talk about it than the Buffalo fan, but maybe that's a good thing for you.
Listen, the expectations, we haven't lived up to them, and we've had a little bit of hype kind of last year heading in. So I think we're kind of slated in the perfect spot of under the radar. A lot of new additions that we could talk about in a second. But yeah, I think we're at a good spot now. So Lindy Ruff comes into Buffalo, takes over for Granato. What are your kind of first thoughts on that, Betsky?
I'm a little bit mixed on this. I know some Sabres fans are very excited about the return of Lindy, but I think there were concerns with how he handled some of the younger players on the Devils the past couple seasons, even though he had a magnificent run with them 2 years ago. And honestly, last year it was injury over injury over injury plus goaltending issues. So it's hard to say if there was coaching issues with that or not, but this is a younger team. So is he going to be able to adapt and help the development for some of those young players that need to become impact players for this team to really take the next step or not? That is kind of the biggest question for me because, Peterka, Quinn, Byram, Power are all very, very young and fresh in the NHL. And this is going to be one of those situations where good coaching will get the best out of them and help them develop. And now you have a very complete roster, or maybe Lindy doesn't give them the leash that they need. And now you're starting to have players stagnate and you're starting to go into potentially the third round of retail.
Yeah, but so my only kind of rebuttal there is let's throw out last season for the Devils because you could list a laundry. There's a laundry list of things that went wrong for this team, right? The year before, when the Devils were kind of in a similar spot as the Sabres, a young team, a bunch of young talent, all the praise was on Lindy for kind of how he was able to manage this team and kind of get the most out of his young players, right? Thompson, Tuck are a little bit kind of, let's say, they're not young players anymore. They're certain, and then you bring in Zucker, another older guy as well. And then going back to Granato too. So Granato was the AHL coach of the Sabres in Rochester. He kind of helped the careers of Peterka, Quinn, kind of a few of these younger guys grew up in the farm system and eventually kind of went to the Sabres. So I think a new voice of kind of some experience that Lindy has could be beneficial to this team. And you look at the turnover, which we can talk about in a second. There's a bunch of new faces on this roster that I think kind of need to get a new leader in there and kind of start a new message with this team going forward. Because while Granato was great with the young guys and kind of adapting with that, I think they need an older coach that's been around the league for a while. Lindy was kind of talked about in New Jersey, got that experience with kind of almost, it's like Lindy got a TikTok and now he's kind of figuring out how to connect with the younger kids per se now. And so now he kind of has that vibe of older coaches, but still being able to be the cool dad in the room, let's say. Franco, did you have any thoughts on Lindy Ruff taking over in Buffalo?
Yeah, I think my initial reaction to it was kind of meh, but the more I think about it, I kind of agree with you here. It's Devils fans seem to knock on Ruff for, not giving Holtz time and other younger players time. But in reality, I mean, guys like Mercer and Luke Hughes got a lot of run last year. I mean, they had plenty of young players over the last couple of years that Lindy Ruff was coaching them. So it's not like maybe Holtz just didn't fit with them. I don't know, So I don't think it's as negative as people were about him leaving there in New Jersey, even though he brought them back kind of to relevance that last year. So maybe it is the right thing. Maybe the change. I never really liked Granato. I thought he made some questionable line changes and stuff like that throughout the last couple of years. It seemed like lines were working, and then all of a sudden you'd be shifting stuff. Like Tuck would be moving down, or Thompson would be moving down, or whatever it was, and you're like, wait, why are you
Skinner's on
breaking
the
up this
third line,
line?
fourth line, scratched
Yeah,
out, and
yeah.
you're
Like, what
just
the
like,
hell are we
yeah,
doing, man? You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like Olofsson moving up and then moving back down. Like when he was hot, he had like his little random hot streaks and stuff too. It was just kind of bizarre. So maybe this is the change they need to kind of get a different voice in there, like you
Yeah.
said.
So speaking of new additions here, the Sabres bring in Ryan McLeod, Sam Lafferty, Jason Zucker, Nicholas Andre Kubel, Dennis Gilbert, Reimer, and then Beck. Melenstein? Melenstein.
Melenstein.
Melenstein here. Franco, any of those names kind of jump out to you and how they're going to fit into this roster?
I really like the Zucker addition to kind of solidify that top two lines, veteran type of presence. I mean, if these lines are to believed where he's playing with Cousins and Quinn, that kind of feels really good. You get two young players. Cousins kind of a little bit more seasoned than Quinn at this point due to the injury issues with Quinn, but and then McLeod coming in on that third line with Benson and Lafferty. I mean that whole fourth line just looks like a pain in the ass to play against, right? Lafferty is just like that checking PK type of guy. Albe Kubel, while he has been known, I'm a Flyers fan, so I remember him as a rookie with them. He's a guy that's known to take some dumb penalties here and there, but again, guy that is gonna get on you in the corner, check you, and slash at your legs and stuff like that. Just a guy you don't want to play against. He's just a pain to play against. So these are the types of guys that kind of round out this team, and I really do like these bottom two lines for this team. Surprisingly, like it's kind of like a hodgepodge of guys that are just like a pain to play against with a little bit of talent in Benson and Greenway and mixed in there. Yeah, I like the additions for this team, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and this team was lacking any sort of physical toughness for the last 5 to 10 years. It's almost felt like when we've kind of been in that limbo phase. So I really like that they kind of are trying to develop a little bit of physical presence on this roster. And then you look at Zucker and Benson too, those two left wingers on the second and third lines, those can go up and down as well. Like Benson can easily play with Cousins and Quinn, and that can be a dynamic second line with the amount of speed that they have. And if Zucker fits better in with McLeod and Greenway, again, that's a full option. There is some ability to change this lineup by all means here. In terms of departures, Matthew Savoy's out, Gergenson's gone, Eric Robinson, Olofsson, Skinner, Jost, and Stillman all gone. I think obviously the biggest name here is Skinner. Olofsson is a goal scorer by all means, but I don't think he truly got his chance on this roster and really kind of fit the mold of Granato's team per se. I would have been interesting to see kind of if he did stay where he fit on this roster, because I think he can be beneficial to a team. He now goes to Vegas, who gets another goal scorer, which is something in itself. But Gergenson's obviously first round draft pick, didn't really pan out to the guy we wanted him to be as a career fourth liner. Him, Olofsson go, and then even I can't think of his name. Florida fourth liner center, or who at the trade deadline. You know what I'm thinking of? Oposo. God, that took way too long to think of. But yeah, Oposo's out as well here. They did bring him back kind of on that 1-year deal to really be that rah-rah guy to push this young team over the edge. And obviously that didn't happen. So happy for him to kind of get his Stanley Cup. Betsky, in terms of the key departures here, is there any one name that kind of stands out to you? Is it Skinner, I'm guessing?
Gergenson's mind-blowing that he was on the Buffalo Sabres for so long. And I actually feel like he may be the piece that the team will miss the most, because I think there was a lot of additions by subtractions. I think they needed to get Skinner out and kind of find more grit and up and down the lineup, especially when you're injecting Benson, Paterka, and Quinn. If you want to keep these young players who have scoring upside but are still developing their two-way game, you got to get rid of the guys like Skinner and Olofsson. So I actually think those two moves are probably for the better, even though, I mean, we know Skinner can put up points. I think for a team structure, this is getting rid of some of the logjam that allows Quinn and Paterka to play up a line, get some extra power play, top unit power play minutes that they wouldn't have been able to have otherwise. So I think all of those moves have been really beneficial. I do think a lot of people are pointing fingers at the teams that they had not made enough moves to really make a playoff push, but I think this is a team that needs to stay the course because of the amount of young kids that they have on the roster. Oh, at the end of the day, Owen Power is not going to be 25 tomorrow. This is going to take a couple of years for him to get to his prime, and you can't just snap your fingers and have him become that player that he was drafted to become. So you can just add pieces to add pieces, but that's not going to be good for the development either. And really, the big move this team made was the Middlestead and Byram trade, which I think you'll start to see the impacts of that more this season than you did last season.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think that was kind of adding to our defensive core. I think Clifton he brought him in last year, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't panned out to be the guy that we've really kind of wanted him to. So I'm hoping kind of something changes this year. He's going to be paired with Samuelsson as of now. Samuelsson has had a ton of injury issues. So if he can stay healthy, I think maybe those two can kind of develop some chemistry. As Samuelsson has now kind of started to shift his game towards a more defensive defenseman, and Clifton can really kind of start to take advantage of kind of rushing the puck more like he did in Boston and kind of jumping up and providing some production offensively. Before we get into some burning questions for the Buffalo Sabres, I'd like to talk to you about BetterHelp. This episode of Expected Bets 4 is brought to you by BetterHelp. Have you ever stopped to think about something new you'd love to learn? As adults, we don't always make the time to learn we used to when we were kids. Kids are constantly exploring and growing, but somewhere along the way, life gets busy and we lose some of that curiosity. What's something you've been wanting to dive into? Maybe it's cooking, picking up a new language, or even figure out your golf game to finally beat your new friend. Just because we're older doesn't mean we have to stop growing. In fact, therapy can help you reconnect with that sense of wonder. It reminds you that your back-to-school moment can happen at any time. Therapy is not just for people who have gone through something major. It's for anyone looking to be the best version of themselves. Therapy can help you learn positive ways to cope with stress, set healthy boundaries, and tackle challenges with more confidence. It's really about giving yourself the tools to thrive and grow, no matter what stage of life you're in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN. Now back to the show. All right, let's get into a few burning questions for the Buffalo Sabres here. I think there's a bunch. I'll start with you here, Franco. Kevin Adams, kind of on the hot seat right now. Not fully, but the seat is a little bit warm. The seat warmer is maybe on level, let's say 2 out of 10. It could get cranked up a bunch this season for sure if the Sabres continue their playoff drought, and they're not favored to do so. So what are your thoughts on kind of Kevin Adams' seat moving forward here with this team?
Yeah, I could see it getting hot, but I mean, you have a new coach, have some new pieces coming in, another year young or another year older for some of these young players. I don't know. I feel like you have to kind of see it out a little bit longer, at least maybe 1 or 2 more years.
I was going to say, yeah,
for his leash, so to speak, as the GM. I think. You know,
I think Lindy bought him another.
I think
Lindy bought him at least another 2 years.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
You can't judge this team right now with the coaching change and with the kind of added veterans to this young core. I mean, like Betsy said, this is like addition by subtraction. All these guys are going to get more playing time than they ever have had. Let's see what they can do. And yeah, you got to see it through. I feel like at this point for them.
Yeah, and they still have 8 million cap space too as they head towards the season. So if this team does kind of show some promise, let's say misses the playoffs by a point or two, they have the ability to go out and kind of maybe try to lure in a bigger free agent to maybe help this defensive depth a little bit, or kind of try to get a missing top six forward. If let's say Cousins, Greenway, or Zucker kind of don't really fit that mold that they wanted to this season. Betsky, the Sabres offense has been it was good 2 years ago, really good. And the issue was kind of falling on the defense and then the goaltending as well. Levi came in, and that was kind of the spark of, hey, wow, maybe the Sabres have a goaltender now. We fast forward to last season. Levi wasn't the guy. UPL kind of took that number one starting goaltending role here. Sabres offense gets a pretty big shakeup with about 5 to 6 new faces kind of permanently in this lineup here. What are your thoughts kind of moving forward with this offensive group? Thompson and Tuck didn't really have great seasons last year, plagued by a little bit of injuries. So do you think they can rebound to kind of that form they found 2 seasons ago?
Yeah, I think that this year may be a little bit of a transition year and allowing Peterka and Quinn and Benson to really start taking steps up and getting more acclimated to the NHL. So I could see them hovering around kind of the same spot for the goals forward per game, because again, Skinner is a productive player despite what you may think of him as far as his two-way play goes. But if everything goes right and these players take that step immediately, and you're getting 20 goal scores out Peterka and Quinn, and Benson's floating around 50 points, now you got a unit that up and down the lineup is scary to play against. And this could bolster the power play units. I mean, you have 3 defensemen who are capable of quarterbacking a power play. This team could be very, very dangerous, even though I suspect that it's maybe one more year from really exploding and seeing that powder keg go off.
Yeah, the power play really struggled last year for the Sabres. They
Yeah.
couldn't kind of get anything going. It was a constant rotation of those 5 to 10 guys, even on the power play too. It just was not clicking in whatever way. So I'm hoping Lindy Ruff kind of comes in and shakes this thing up as well. So the Sabres goaltending is another interesting area, topic of discussion, excuse me. UPL played 54 games for the squad last year. Levi had 23. Levi was slated to be the guy, as you mentioned before, but UPL kind of handled the workload pretty well. 2.57 goals against average. But again, that defensive core kind of wasn't what we thought it would be, gelling with Samuelson being in and out of the lineup, Dahlin kind of still being a defensive liability at some point now. Reimer gets added to that goaltender room here. Franco, what are your thoughts and kind of outlook for this this goaltending trio, I guess you can call it now, because it's not, the top 2 aren't solidified by any means.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very high on Reimer. He hasn't been very good the last few years, it seemed like. But maybe that split between him and Levi is able to take 30 games away from UPL, maybe 35 or something like that, lighten that load a little bit. And I think that can kind of help him. But again, you're getting these guys experience, right? If UPL ends up being the guy, like he had a nice long season last year, he's not coming off like a smaller workload. Maybe he can be ready for this next step. And who knows? I mean, maybe Levi is ready too, if that's the case. At least Reimer gives you that guy you can throw in. You don't have to worry too much. He's not the best, but it's, I feel like in Buffalo in general, the last few years, it's kind of been that revolving door of these weird, like
Craig Anderson for a while. Yeah.
I mean,
there's a few names you could toss out there that you're like, oh boy.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to be betting the overs when Reimer starts, but I mean, maybe there'll be fun games to watch at least with this forward group. So I think this team in general feels like a team that's going to be an over type team anyway, right? They have enough offensive firepower. Their blue line is more offensively based than really defensively based, at least typically the younger guys. Yep. So in reality, it's I won't say that goaltending doesn't matter for this particular team, but it just feels like the way that they're built, at least right now, feels like more of a like let's try to outscore these guys as opposed to let's try to win a 2-1 game.
The win is
Yeah,
more important than the goals against average.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
yeah.
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 And we looked 2 years ago, and Aaron Dell, Dustin Tokarski, and Malcolm Subban all played real NHL games for this
Yep.
team. So when you're
Wow.
looking at the goaltender room, it's much better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes sense. All right, best and worst case scenario for this team here. I don't think we talked about Boston before this, but I don't think the gap's as large here. I think best case, let's keep it pretty simple for this team. Just get in the playoffs and get
Yep.
kind of this young core some experience. Is that kind of where your head was, Betsky?
Yep, exactly. Best case scenario is you sneak in and get those young players exposed to what being in the playoffs is like, and be happy with whatever that outcome is.
Yeah, I think that's anything but a sweep. I think you consider a fantastic season in the playoffs too, because it's a whole different game there. And I mean, you look at the size of Benson, Quinn, Cousins isn't huge either. Like Zucker, big guy, but again, kind of on the older side of things too. So it'd be interesting to see if Greenway and that fourth line kind of step up to be the enforcers that we are hoping they become. Worst case, Franco. I think we know where this goes, but let's hear it.
String of the same things, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That
I don't
past
know.
11 seasons.
To me, this
Wow.
team feels closer to like what we saw from the Devils a couple years ago than what we've seen from Buffalo the last 11 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
I mean, it's like that type of team, right? Like young, exciting, some veteran pieces. The goaltending might not be quite there. Best, like you said, best case they make it to the playoffs. Maybe they surprise the team, but I think they can be in that hunt. And in reality, I mean, they weren't eliminated until pretty late in the season last year either. So
No. And the year before they missed out on by 1 point. They lost to
yeah,
Florida with 3 games to go, and that's how Florida got in.
exactly. So I
Wow.
mean, it as much as seeing that they haven't made the playoffs in 11 years hurts and it just feels bad. It's like they've been pretty damn close. And if something bounces the right way for them, just literally one game goes another way, or you pick up an overtime win. Even I mean the way
We
that
sucked in overtime. We were
yeah, I mean the way the
horrendous.
NHL is nowadays, it's like you have these teams making the playoff. I think the Islanders had like a shitload of overtime wins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
like I get it. It's still part of the game, but like it's like did they really deserve to be there? So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's kind of how it works. They're going to be that fringe team where they're right on the border of it, and can they get a couple more bounces that go their way? Maybe so this year.
Sucks that they're not in the West.
Yeah.
Every team in this division is good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I think the Sabres will certainly play a part, and at least we get a fourth of that Stanley Cup from Florida, of getting them in the playoffs 2 seasons ago, and then kind of giving them Sam Reinhart, Rodriguez, and a bunch of other guys. So I think we'll take a fourth.
South.
Yeah, we'll take a fourth. That's all we want. Just a fourth of that cup. All right, before we get into some season points totals and other odds, I'd like to talk to you about DraftKings. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. The NFL season kicks off on Thursday night with the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs are currently favored by 3, with the total being set at 46.5. If you're looking to place your bet on Week 1 NFL action, head over to DraftKings. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you just bet $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Only at DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
All right, the Sabres regular season points total is set at 88.5. Last year they had 84. Betsky, I'll start with you in this. Do we think the offseason additions have made a 5-point difference? The division has gotten a little bit worse.
I think the division got tighter. I think there's less. It's less top heavy.
Yes, yeah.
Everybody's
There's
a
more
little bit
points
closer
available now. It seems like too, in terms of the margin.
Or they're all going to eat each other, and you're getting a division that is all in this like 88 to like 95 range, and then obviously a couple teams are going to be in the hundreds. But it may be one of those situations where
you look down the line and it's Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa,
I mean,
kind of all in that kind of, let's say, B tier of scrum, and it's just chaos happening in the last 2 weeks of the regular season.
Those divisional games are going to be so important for just about every single team in this division to make the playoffs. So this point total scares me a little bit. I think there's still questions about goaltending, like you mentioned. I do think this could still be a little bit of an adjustment year, letting guys get that exposure to the NHL. Would this team surprise me if they made the playoffs, though? No, not at all. So it's kind of similar to the Boston, but maybe on the opposite side here is maybe take the under on the point total, but go for make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't hate it
way.
Frank, I can talk to you, but the division conference, the Stanley Cup odds, those are pretty much all off the board for me with this team here. But it is almost a kind of reverse situation here with Boston of you're taking them to make the playoffs because they could sneak in there. But you also see another season where they're just continuing to grow and they finish with 85, 87 points and they're sitting in 5th or 6th in the division again.
Do they make the playoffs with 89 points?
Yeah, you'd have to look. I mean, again, if you're considering that this division is going to kind of eat itself alive and thus reduce the points, right? Like Florida was like 110 or something like that. Boston was 109 last year. So like you drop them down maybe 5 to 7 points each, and that gets dispersed among these other teams. I mean, I think even Montreal kind of does a little bit better than we think we are, at least on paper. So we'll talk about them later, but yeah, I mean, I could see them being, like I said, I could see them being around that fringe. So instead of taking the 88.5, I would rather just take to make the playoffs a plus 180. You're getting better value anyway. I mean, you take the 88.5, it's minus 115. You're just losing that juice. Why not just take them to make the playoffs and then just hold that ticket and see how they do,
Yeah.
91 points made the playoffs last year.
Okay.
For the Capitals, and Detroit had 91 as well, but did not make it.
Yeah, and you remember how that crazy stuff went down. There was like that empty netter in the one game, and then
the Caps made it the last day. I think
Philly like pulled the goalie, right? Like they had to win the game.
Yeah,
that's right.
And Caps won. Yeah.
So, if it's like that with this division as opposed to the Metro with the Caps and stuff like that, like this. It could be kind of play out the same way. And I think when we get to the Metro, we might be kind of feeling the same way where the bottom teams got like a little bit better. The top teams may have gotten a little bit worse. And that's kind of how the NHL is built to be with the cap and stuff. So hopefully we do see a little bit more turnover and more fun stuff towards the end of the season.
So this is interesting. In the 21-22 season, the Panthers had 122 points. Toronto had 115. Tampa had 110. And Boston had 107. Then Buffalo was 5th with 75. So that is how the disparity of this division just a couple seasons ago. Last year, 110 for Panthers, 109 for Boston, 102 for Toronto. So only 300-point teams. Tampa with 98, Detroit 91, and then Buffalo 84, and then Ottawa and the Canadiens. So it's going to get even tighter from there is my prediction here.
Yeah, I would certainly agree there. While these team props, team futures are probably not that enticing, there are a few player futures that we've kind of talked about before. So there's 4 listed on DraftKings right now in terms of points. Alex Tuch at 65.5, Tage Thompson at 70.5, Rasmus Dahlin at 62.5, JJ Peterka at 53.5, and Dylan Cousins at 58.5. So we got 5 markets available for points here. Any thoughts on this, Franco? Are you looking at any one of these guys? I have 2 that pop out to me, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
To me, Peterka's the number one guy that sticks out just because he's on that top line. 53.5 just feels short considering he's going to be playing with Tage and Tuch. Obviously, we could see some line shifts, so like you want to kind of pay attention to that leading up to the season. But I mean, I like him and Cousins both, to be honest with you. I think this team is going to score goals. I don't think that's going to be their problem. I think it's going to be the other end of the ice that's going to be their problem, if anything. So I don't mind looking over for any of these guys, to be honest with you. Dahlin feels maybe a little high at 62.5, but I can see a return to form from Tuch and Tage. You know, as long as they stay healthy, I think that was the biggest question for both of them last year. Both guys missed time and kind of just didn't look right. And Skinner in general in their line looked terrible all year. So now you're adding the energy of Peterka on that line. That this could be a fun line to watch.
Yeah. And we even saw last year too, Peterka can rotate down to that second line with Cousins and Quinn as well. And when Quinn was healthy, that line was phenomenal. But obviously he was out for kind of an extended period of time that season. So Peterka had 50 last year. They now only bump him up 4 points to 53.5 pretty much. You also look at the market. How many people are betting JJ Peterka over 53.5 points this season? Not a lot of casual fans.
That may be the best bet for this team's futures. I think I didn't realize that. Agree. Yeah. I love that. Tuch actually scares me a little bit too, because there's a world where Tuch is on the second line with Cousins and maybe like Benson or something to help shelter him, and now you have Peterka and Quinn at the top line, or you know. I kind of could see a world where Tuch is shifted around a little bit more depending on injuries and maybe not stapled to Tage as he has been in the past. The Dahlin one's really interesting. 59 points last season, 73 the one before that, and 53 3 seasons ago. But that team is so different. This power play can start rocking and rolling, and he gets holds the top power play quarterback position, which I expect he would. I don't think Byram or Power is going to take that. If this team were to take a step up, I think it will come from Dahlin taking a kind of returning to last year or 2 seasons ago's form.
Yeah, so Dahlin had 59 points last season and 20 goals. 62 points, I think, is completely reasonable because we did see him and Byram start to click towards the end of the year. And you're right. If that power play gets even 5% better, I think he's going to be involved on so many goals too. So I don't hate the 62 on that. That was the other one. So Peterka at 53.5 and Dahlin at 62.5 are kind of my 2 favorites as of now. The goal market, I don't really think I'm touching. I don't really trust Tage at that 36.5 mark. Obviously, kind of a little bit of regression year last year. Tuch had 20 goals last year. So did Dahlin. Peterka at 25.5. Don't really love either, despite having 28 last year. I can kind of see him being more of a playmaking role in that first line with Tuch and Thompson. I think it's going to be spread out more. So, any other thoughts on that one?
Nah, that it all worries me a little too much about the shifting of lines and whatnot. If anything, Tage, but
that would be the only
point.
Yeah.
Then at that point, I'm almost wanting to just put a couple bucks on the Rocket.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see. We'll get to that in a second, but I could see a world where Tage kind of returns to form.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah.
We talked about before we got into this, but he was never right last year. He just didn't look the same. And we know he's a guy that you're betting his goal scorer prop, even though it's minus 110 in a good matchup, like that. He was that guy a year ago, 2 years ago. So there's no reason why we can't see that return to form where he's more in that like Pasternak range of 50, like upwards of 50 goals. Like I could certainly see it. He's gonna be the first line player on this team. It's not, I could see the argument against Tuck being on the top line. Like Tage is top line, top power play, period.
Yeah.
And he's the engine, so to speak, for this team. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and Tage 2 years ago too, you're looking at his shots on goal even of 3.5, and then some games would be 4.5, and you're just like you're betting it without even really kind of doing too much research because he's just sitting there kind of in that Ovechkin spot for a while, just along kind of on that faceoff dot, just rifling pucks on the power play when that offense was pretty explosive. So, all right, last segment here. We got some awards. Rocket Richard, Tage 50-1. We had mentioned this one obviously a few minutes ago, but I think this is an interesting one if he does kind of return to form and this team does click early.
It's hard to want to bet against anyone not named Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, or Draisaitl, though. It's the only thing.
Kucherov, yeah, too. Yeah.
I think I like this more than Pasternak, which we obviously talked about in the Boston episode, because the odds are just so much better. I mean, this is not something to put a full unit on. The chances of him getting the Rocket are very low, but at 5-1, 50. Matthews gets injured or 51. Thank you. Yeah. If Matthews gets injured, McDavid gets injured, and now you got a guy who's put up 47 goals 2 years ago, who may be on a more well-rounded offense, and if he can get into the 55 to 60 range, we may not have a season like last year where we had the Reinhart, the Pasta, Matthews, all these people that really went off, and maybe one of those seasons where we get a little bit of regression on goal scoring. But yeah, I would. It makes me kind of want to take that as a sprinkle for if I'm talking about this award. Again, I'm not going to put too much money on it, but
it's a better option. It's a better option than him over 36.5 goals. I think there's more value on this than taking his just straight prop for goals. As we saw Matthews last year, finished with 69. The year before, McDavid was 64. But if you go back the 3 years before that, Matthews had 60, Matthews had 41, and then Ovechkin and Pasta split it at 48. If we do see that goal scoring regression, kind of like we thought we would, and if he does get that 50 to 55 goal range, he certainly could be live. And again, it's another hedging opportunity that you're looking for. While you're not love to have the winner, but if you're getting these guys at 50-1 down the stretch of the last month, that's what you want to be. Like you want to have him at 50-1, and then maybe sprinkle on two other guys that are in that 3 to 4 horse race that you think have options.
Yeah.
The other trophy that we talked about as well for the Sabres, I think the Art Ross, the Hart, the Calder, and the Selke, I don't think there's really any contenders on this roster. The Norris, Dahlin at 18-1 is another really, really interesting option here. Him and Byram kind of got to develop a little bit of chemistry, as we talked about before, towards the end of the season. If he starts to kind of continue his goal scoring progression and offensive production, really gets involved, and like you mentioned too, the power play starts to get going. At 18-1, he's one of those players that you kind of talk about that can move the puck and can be an elite offensive defenseman in the league.
Yeah, I like that. I like the price on him, to be honest with you. Compared to McAvoy, it was 20-1.
McAvoy is 20-1.
Yeah, there's way more offensive upside with Dahlin than there is with McAvoy. I mean, just regardless of how you feel about either of those players, like I think this team is more of an exciting offensive projection for me, and I think being on that top power play is pretty big. So I don't mind that price at all for him.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the two other options are obviously Owen Power and Bowen Byram. I don't think those are going to be kind of the guys. Power, maybe we look at another kind of 2 to 3 years as joining the Norris conversation if he continues to develop. But that was Dahlin at 8-1. I think when you look at the other options, it's a pretty good price for that. Any final thoughts on this Sabres roster? Again, lots of question marks going forward with them for sure, but should be a very exciting year. More excited than kind of as a fan base we've been the past few seasons, just given the coaching changes and the amount of turnover that we finally started to have in the forward group. We've kind of solidified a defensive unit, and the goaltending too, heading into the season, we're at least optimistic about that it can turn into kind of a tandem.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite teams to place prop bets on all season long last year. You get really good value. They're kind of an underappreciated team as far as the book's respect for them.
Yep.
You got Paterka and Quinn, who you'll be able to get point props for. Pretty much anybody in that top six, their goal price outside of maybe Tage is always pretty good. Shots on goal props pretty much all season. There's plenty of options and lots of guys who are fairly consistent. I mean, Darlene on the
That
road,
2.5 mark, it was
oh my Lord.
fantastic.
I mean, that was something that you could hit almost every away game early into the season. I don't think we ever quite got Tage it to become that consistent shooter that we did 2 seasons ago. But
No.
like we mentioned, there were some issues. So if he's fully healthy, watch out. This is a team that night in, night out, you want to have circled and just kind of go through your list and see who's kind of hot and ride some of those props, because you're going to get good value on them.
And I'm going to make a prediction now that Cousins or Quinn is going to start to become one of those elite shots on goal guys, with Zucker joining that group and becoming that kind of veteran playmaker for one of those. Cousins had his stretch too last year where he was fantastic at home. Quinn, we never really got to see in terms of shots on goal, but Cousins or Quinn are going to be kind of those two guys on that second line. If they're at 2.5 and it's kind of around that -110, -120 range, I think they're really going to be some great player prop options for this season. Franco,
same game options too. This is a team to circle for same game options.
Yeah, put them all down for 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, Paterka had a run too last year where it was like, it seemed like he was hitting every game, and he would start like the first period, no shots, and you're like, oh, that's dead. And then check it a couple minutes later. Oh, he has 3 shots. Whoa, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of excitement. I think there's lots of opportunities for goals and points props. I think a lot, like you said, a lot of opportunities for shot props, and it's a thing to just continue to monitor, see how this team looks, and if we get the return of Tage back to who he was, man, I think that is the most the thing I'm most excited for. And I was looking at some of these alternate markets too for you can get him 40 plus goals at plus 200 on DK. I like that a lot better than taking his, 36
and a half. Yeah.
At minus 115 or whatever. So just another thing to kind of consider. If he is returning back to form, 40 goals is definitely in reach for him.
Yeah. And the Sabres kind of defensive group too is more offensive minded. UPL saves could also be another kind of go-to prop as we start the season as well. So be sure to keep that in mind. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone for listening. Be sure to subscribe. And as always, you can find all of our social media at Expected Bets 4. It's our Twitter, our Instagram, and YouTube. Be sure to stay tuned for a bunch of new content coming out. We appreciate everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.